But our next two candidates are candidates for the mayor of the city of Missoula. We have Mark Healon and we have the incumbent, Mayor Dan Kemmis. I've asked Mark and Dan to draw, and Mark will go first and Mr. Kemmis will go second. I'd like to go through a very brief introduction of each candidates, and then I'll ask them each to give a 5 or 7 minute presentation on why they think you should vote for them. So I'll begin with Mark Healon. And Mark tells me that he is a 5th generation Montanan and a Missoula native. He was educated locally and studied business at Ricks College in the University of Montana. He has lived in South America and Europe, lived under both a dictatorship and socialism. He worked for 8 years in the employment and training industry as a consultant to a Fortune 500 companies. He was instrumental in helping thousands of disadvantaged individuals find permanent employment. As a consultant, Mark worked extensively with federal, state, and local governments in the area of employment and training. Mark currently owns a local business, is involved with youth groups such as Boy Scouts, Little League Baseball, and Little Grizzly Football. He is married and has 2 children. Mark and his family are committed to serving the citizens of Missoula. Mayor Kemmis, as I have said, is currently the mayor of Missoula, has had that position since 1990. From 1988 to 1989, he was a member of the City Council. From 1983 to 1984, he was the Speaker of the Montana House of Representatives. From 1981 to 1982, he was the Minority Leader of the Montana House of Representatives. And 75 and 76 and 79 through 84, he was a member of the Montana House of Representatives. He has a BA in Political Science from Harvard and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Montana Law School. He is currently the chairman of the National League of Cities Leadership Training Council and a member of the National Civic League Advisory Committee. He is the father of 4 children. The oldest are alumni of Rattlesnake schools. The youngest 2 are at Sussex School. His wife, Jean, works for the Montana Council of Families. So, Mark, would you like to begin with your presentation?
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm excited to be here tonight. As a political novice, it always is enlightening to the individual as you go along through a campaign. And I've been telling individuals that when this is all completed, I'm going to write a book, and quite frankly, probably a very long book on the experiences of running a political campaign as a novice. But I'm excited to be here for a number of reasons. First of all, because I grew up here. And as was mentioned earlier, as a 5th generation Montanan, I feel that my roots are grounded very firmly in the state of Montana. I am excited about the opportunity to serve our city. It never occurred to me growing up that I'd ever come to this point and make a decision to run for the office or become mayor of the city of Missoula. Now, Missoula is unique in our state. We have, and we do just so many things well. Our spirit of cooperation, entrepreneurship, and foresight creates pride within our entire community. This enthusiasm provides us with what I believe is a recipe for success. As a small business person, my experience in dealing with real-life situations enables me to concentrate on solutions. I have to look to the bottom line every day with my business. And I believe that in government, as in the private sector, we need to focus to that. Government should not simply throw money at problems or study issues to death. I believe that the mayor's role is to provide common sense leadership to create consensus within our community and achieve both action and results. Our community is important to me. As mentioned, I enjoy working with young people. In the Little Grizzly Football program, Little League Baseball, and BSA, Boy Scouts of America program, I have seen over the years a number of fine individuals develop through these programs, and I'm proud to say that I was a part of that. As a volunteer in these organizations, I've seen a tremendous vitality of our community groups here in the Rattlesnake as well as in other parts of the city. Along with my wife and children, we're committed to staying here. As mentioned, I've lived in South America under a dictatorship. I've lived in Europe under socialism. I've had the opportunity to live in some of the largest metropolitan areas in the world, and I chose to come back here and raise my children here for one very simple reason. It's my hometown, and I'm dedicated to preserving the quality of life that we have in this community. Now, as mayor, my background as an employer provides me with insight in dealing with many of the business issues that I believe will come to the forefront. The sale of Champion is one incident that I believe that as a community, we have to become involved because we're seeing an erosion in our economic base of our community. Now, I was involved for a number of years with a national consulting firm that dealt with employment and training, and I feel quite strongly about giving individuals that are disadvantaged, that lose their positions as these individuals at Champion are about to do, opportunities. And we have to create opportunities within our community to allow them the privilege of staying and living here. Now, we've talked about growth. We've talked about limiting growth. I believe that if we limit growth, we are going to do two things. One, my 83-year-old grandparents, as the cost of the property taxes increase, will not allow them to stay in this community, as well as other young people who will not be able to exist in the community if we stop growth entirely. So I believe that we have to look at controlled growth for our community, expand the economic base, and by expansion of that economic base, I am speaking specifically about non-polluting industry, such as high-tech, computer-based, and service sector types of programs and companies that come into our valley. The biggest drain of our community, I believe, is the loss of our youth. We educate them at a very high cost to 800,000 people in the state of Montana, and then we export them from our state. And I think that is a tragic loss to our communities. It erodes the basic principle of unity within a society when our people cannot find viable job opportunities with our own communities. Without that, we have to look at and we have to expand the opportunities for the individuals that live here. Now, yes, that comes with some growth, but it must be a controlled growth. And without expansion of our basic business community and the increase in tax base there, we will be able to control that growth. Presently, I believe that we have not done that and that we need to focus in that direction. As mayor, I pledge to work with the community leaders to provide consensus and common sense leadership for the city of Missoula. I want to create job opportunities for our citizens, establish and maintain an open working relationship with the city council. This is my hometown, and I will do all that I can to enable it to move forward. And I appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Healon. Again, I would ask everyone to hold their applause and other comments until the end so we can move along expeditiously. Mayor Kemmis?
I'm going to try speaking without the microphone, but if it's a bother to anybody, please let me know and I'll be glad to use it. One of the real pleasures of being the mayor of Missoula is a pleasure that I think that we all share to a certain extent, and that's the pleasure of having people outside Missoula recognize what a fine place this is to live. What I've found over the last 4 years is that that has happened increasingly, that wherever I go or whoever I greet to Missoula, that Missoula's reputation for being a fine place to live is spreading and deepening. And that's something that I think that we should all take pride in. It's nothing that the mayor can take credit for, I assure you, nor do I ever try to do that. But it is something that all of us together can take great pride in and take great satisfaction in. And yet we also know that that very success, everything that makes this such a fine place to live, is creating for us now our greatest challenge. Because as more and more people decide that wherever it is that they find themselves, that they're not happy there, and as they look around and say, where is it that I would really like to go to raise my family, or where is it that I would like to go to retire, that increasingly Missoula finds its way onto their list. And that's something, again, that we can take pride in, but we also have to recognize that it presents us now with our greatest challenge. And the challenge is not and will not be an easy one. Yet I am convinced that if there is any place in the country, and I say this without any exaggeration, if there is any place in the country that has the capacity to meet this challenge in all of its complexity, that this is the place. But what I have also learned from my involvement with other city leaders across the country is that the only way that any community from now on is going to be able to solve a problem like the challenge of growth in Missoula or any other major problem, the key ingredient to solving problems like this from this point forward is going to be the development of a greater capacity for involved citizenship. There is no easy answer to this or any other problem that can come out of City Hall. And I will not stand here and tell you that I, as mayor, either have the solutions to our problems or that I will have those solutions in the next 4 years. We will only find those solutions together. And we will only find those solutions if we're willing to do the hard work together of continuing to work toward them. And that is where the real challenge of leadership and citizenship comes in this city. I have been in this room too often facing too many angry crowds to have any belief that telling people what they want to hear is the way to good governance in Missoula. What we need to do is to continue to work hard at every problem that we face. Let me just give you one example. When we proposed the sewering of the Rattlesnake, and when we got the response from the Rattlesnake Homeowners Association, I went first of all to my city engineers and I said, we're going to have to sit down with those people and work on this problem. But I also went to the leaders of the Homeowners Association and I said, if I'm going to pull back on this, I'll do it on one condition, and that is that you work with me toward a solution. That's the condition that I will bring to every problem that we face, whether it's zoning, whether it's growth, whatever it is. And I will never tell you that there is some simple solution, that all you have to do is elect the right people and you'll automatically get that solution. There is only one way we can solve the great challenges of Missoula, and that is to continue to work together and to build our capacity to do that.
Thank you, Mayor Kemmis. We'll now begin the round of general questions. Again, it will be the same format as before. I'll read a question. Both candidates will have the chance to respond. Based on the random drawing, Mr. Healon will go first, followed by Mr. Kemmis. And some of the questions that I ask will be repetitious. The first question, Mr. Healon and Mr. Kemmis, is many pressing issues are facing the Rattlesnake Valley. For example, zoning, sewering, motorized and non-motorized transportation plans, sidewalk plans, etc. If the Rattlesnake citizens indicate a clear mandate of their positions on these issues, will you be responsive to and supportive of these positions, or will you pursue a different agenda? Mr. Healon?
Yes, I'll support the individuals in the community. I have said all along that it's extremely important in any issues such as Rattlesnake, Grant Creek, any of these areas that are becoming increasingly developed, that the individuals within that community have an opportunity to govern themselves to a certain extent. However, I also believe that those individuals that have purchased property under existing guidelines must also have an opportunity to voice their opinions. And so I believe that we have to come to a compromised position on these issues, and we have to allow the community as a whole to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Healon. Mayor Kemmis?
One of the challenging things about being mayor, I think, that's different than being on the city council is that you have to be mayor for the whole city. And that means that you have to look to the good of the whole city and not to any given neighborhood. The way that the question was put, I would apply back to the issue that I raised before. It is not enough for all of the people in the Rattlesnake to say that they don't want the sewer on the terms that it was proposed. That's a start. But simply for City Hall then to say, okay, we give up no sewer, That's not responsible, and I will never approach anything in that way. I will always come back and say, then let's figure out what will work. And you can count on me to do that. You can count on me to be honest when I believe that not everything has been taken account of. It's often too easy to just say no. And too often what we have from neighborhoods is the response, just say no. That's never good enough.
Thank you, Mayor Kemmis. Second question. Mr. Healon, if elected, what will you personally do to assure the continuation of local TV coverage in the Rattlesnake Valley?
Well, quite frankly, I haven't studied the issue to any extent, and I can't give you a definitive answer on that. From what I heard from the council members, it was a Republican public. It wasn't a brown recluse. But obviously there has money talks, and as a small business person, if the people do not like my product, they do not buy my product, and consequently, I believe what will happen up in the Rattlesnake will be a decision by you, the consumers, and I support and advocate you folks taking a stand and whether you consume this product or not.
Thank you, Mr. Healon. Mayor Kemmis?
I don't know of any direct power that the city has over this particular decision. We do, I think, have the capacity which we should exercise to let the cable providers know that we think that locally produced television is important and that our residents should have it. And I am willing to state that very strongly to the cable providers. I do not believe that we can have an informed citizenry that does not have access to locally produced television.
Thank you, Mayor Kemmis. The next question. Given the limitations of our environment to provide clean air, water, and open space, would you support a growth management policy that would limit development? If so, what kind of policies would you recommend? And if not, what alternatives would you suggest to maintain environmental quality? That's kind of a long question, so if you'd like me to repeat part of it, I'd be glad to. Mr. Healon?
Actually, I'd like you to repeat it. I was chasing that spider again, and I missed the first part of it, but I would like to address development in general. As I stated in my opening remarks, growth as it is occurring now in the Missoula Valley, we've seen extensive growth throughout the hillsides. All we have to do is look up on our far views and we can see what has developed here over the last 10, 15 years. It's extensive, and we are one of the last best places to be, and we will see a continuation of that. However, I think that we're looking at a situation that we're becoming a retirement community, and as was mentioned earlier, Boulder, Colorado, I think is a case study in where they limited growth to a high degree and essentially forced out many of the individuals that were on fixed income, that were low income homeowners and rental individuals. They were forced out of the community, and it became a high price community and made it very difficult for individuals to come in. Are we 1 minute here? Okay. Just to sum it up real quickly, I believe that we have to control the growth. And that comes through expansion of our business economy, providing opportunity for individuals within the community for viable employment opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Healon. Mr. Kemmis?
I think that it's vital that Missoula protect the open spaces, that we protect the crucial resources within the community. I think that direct controls over growth are very difficult to achieve, and I think the Boulder example is a good one. I think it will be more fruitful for us to work with surrounding communities and try to encourage the development of some of the surrounding communities, because Missoula will always benefit from prospering small towns around Missoula. And quite frankly, I think the one thing that we can do is to provide leadership to other towns around the country that are trying to make themselves better so that their people can stay there. I've been amazed at how many people from around the country have asked to find out what is going on with Missoula Vision 2020 because they want to do the same kind of thing in their community so that they can keep people there. I think Missoula ought to invest a little energy in that.
Thank you, Mayor Kemmis. The next question, gentlemen. How will you balance the interest of the neighborhood against the interest of the community at large? Mr. Healon?
It's a very good question. I believe, and I can remember playing down on the Rattlesnake Creek here when I was a kid on the rope swing, and I think some of the other individuals in this audience were there with me, and we've seen it grow, we've seen it prosper as a community within a community. And I think we see that in other areas in the north side. Each individual area has its character, and we must allow that character to flourish. However, as a whole, the community also has to address some very pressing issues. And we must focus as a whole to the community. And again, there's not a simple solution for any of this, but it must be addressed, and it must be from a vocal citizens and allow not only the small vocal groups, but also the silent majority to have a say in what occurs in the growth and the community of Missoula.
Thank you, Mr. Kemmis.
I've all along been a very strong proponent of strong neighborhood autonomy and of listening carefully to neighborhoods. And I've often been criticized by the Chamber of Commerce, among others, for supporting neighborhood involvement and neighborhood autonomy. But I have always linked that support with a request that neighborhood leaders involve themselves in something like the Missoula Neighborhood Network, where they are given the encouragement to pay attention not only to their own neighborhood's interests, but to the good of the entire community. Because we can't just do it neighborhood by neighborhood. We've got to have a place where neighborhoods take responsibility for the good of the entire community, and I think the Neighborhood Network is a good place to do that.
Thank you, Mayor Kemmis. The next question, gentlemen. How do you propose to take care of the fire and medical emergencies in the areas west of town that will be annexed soon? Mr. Healon?
That is an issue that, given what's currently happening with the city as far as the new fire stations that the ground is just broken for, that is the beginning process. Now, obviously, some of the individuals on the outside edges of the Rattlesnake Valley, as well as the Grant Creek area, will have increasingly difficulty in response times, because as we grow, obviously the need, and I sit at Malfunction Junction every day, and quite frankly, I see a growing need for emergency vehicles, and it is increasingly, it's escalating, just because of the growth that's involved there. And so I believe that we need to look at viable solutions, working in cooperation with the rural fire districts that are involved in those areas. And yes, we have a professional staff at the city, and we need to work with the individuals in the outlying areas to make sure that our citizenry is protected. Ultimately, that's what it boils down to. Are we taking care of the people that are paying the taxes?
Thank you, Mayor Kemmis.
One of the things that I'm proudest of during my tenure as mayor is that during that time we built up gradually and steadily to the addition of another engine company to our firefighting force. And this year, with the budget that we just adopted, we've added 7 new firefighters that will put in place that 4th engine company. We also asked the voters of Missoula to approve bonds for 2 new fire stations, and those were approved, and we've broken ground for a new fire station out near Reserve Street, and that will very adequately provide service to the area that will be the next major area of annexation. But I have also been a consistent proponent of increased cooperation between the city fire department and the rural fire department. And it was under my leadership that we achieved the agreement that Mike Bennett spoke of earlier with rural fire for closest station response. I will continue to push very hard for the highest level of coordination between those 2 emergency response entities that we can achieve.
Thank you, Mayor Kemmis. The next question, gentlemen. How do you intend to involve citizens in future planning projects in light of the recent failure of the proposed zoning changes and Vision 2020? Mr. Healon?
That's a difficult question because I think one of the things that we saw in the Vision 2020 program is that in the initial stages of any program, and I want to congratulate the mayor on initiating that, because I felt that was a prime, important, and a good example of foresight of our community. However, we have to remember two things, is that I believe that in order to maintain communication through all levels of the community, we have to remember that there are some very strict time requirements of many individuals in the business community, in the other sectors of the community. And I think what we saw over a period of time was a fallout, and we lost some of the voices in the community just because of the amount of time that was required of those individuals in working in that type of program. I believe that vision is important, but I also believe that we need to focus on the day-to-day aspects. We tend sometimes in government to study issues and drag those issues out, and at times we need to make decisions, and I advocate continue to look at our growth in the future, but also I advocate that we take an active and on the present of what is currently happening in our community.
Thank you, Mark. Mayor Kemmis?
With regard to Vision 2020, I'm tempted to quote Mark Twain, where he once said that the news of his death had been greatly exaggerated. The Vision 2020, as far as I'm concerned, is not dead and will not die, because this community cannot afford not to do Vision 2020. And as long as I am mayor, we will continue to move in that direction. The City Council appropriated $20,000 for a long-range strategic planning and visioning process. At least one member of the council said he wanted to call it something besides Vision 2020. I'm reminded of the old saying, you can call me anything you want, but don't call me late to dinner. As far as I'm concerned, we can call this late to dinner, but we're going to do it. As far as the failure of zoning goes, there's a problem. And the problem is that we've got a majority on the City Council that every time it comes up against a difficult problem wants to turn around and go in the other direction. And we need some changes on the City Council. And I was tempted to suggest that this forum tonight be addressed simply to the City Council races, because the election next Tuesday is one of the most important elections that this city is ever going to face. We need some changes. We need some people on that council that are willing to face these tough decisions and do something about them.
Thank you, Mayor Kemmis. We have time for one more question. That question is as follows. Absentee property owners have purchased homes in Missoula's and rented rooms to students at very high rents, escalating rents citywide. The occupancy composition is in direct violation of the family definition in our zoning. What is your position as far as enforcement of the zoning violations on this matter? Mr. Healon?
Well, I think that's a 2-3 point question. First of all, it gets down to the basic definition of family, which needs to be addressed here, not only in Missoula, but statewide. And I believe that has to be addressed in creation of zoning regulations. Now, in these particular instances where we have a zoning ordinance in place, I believe that they must be enforced. With the absentee ownership issue, that is something that has to be researched. I hadn't looked at that intensively, but I do believe that in these communities, in order to maintain the integrity of communities as they were zoned, that we must act accordingly. And then we must get down as a community and make a decision on family and what constitutes family. I believe that I live in a situation where I, as a head of household with my 2 children and wife, are an example of a family unit. And I hold a fairly narrow view of family, and that is an important issue that I think we must address as a community.
Thank you, Mark. Mayor Kemmis?
Just this morning in our staff meeting, we addressed the issue of enforcement of that particular provision. the law being on the books must and will be enforced. There are circumstances in which an immediate and overnight enforcement would work at a very grave hardship, especially on students who may have found themselves in a situation that they had no idea that they were getting into a housing situation that was not in conformance with the law. In those situations, our policy has been and will be to inform the owners and the tenants of a violation, and in the case of students, to give them until the end of the semester to find other housing. Given the housing situation as it now exists, any other approach would simply be inhumane, but we must enforce the law. On the other hand, the law as it now stands, I think, is subject to serious challenge at the state level, if not the federal level. And I think that we need to be looking very hard at a more workable definition of family so that we don't have the whole thing struck down altogether.
Thank you, Mayor Kemmis. This concludes this part of the program, but before I ask you to give the two candidates a round of applause, let me make 3 or 4 points. The first is that there are a lot of questions here. Obviously, we did not have time to ask all those questions, and frankly, some of them are extremely controversial, and I wouldn't embarrass they or myself by asking them. But if you feel a need to ask those questions, I'm sure that both candidates will be here for a while, and I'm sure they would entertain your questions at their home or their place of employment. Secondly, as the mayor has pointed out, there is an election next Tuesday. It's called the primary election, and I would encourage you, the association encourages each of you to turn out and get all your neighbors to turn out. And finally, before I turn this back, we would like to point out that following that election, the number of candidates, at least in the city council race, will be reduced, and the association is sponsoring a similar forum for you to meet with the reduced field of candidates on October 7th, same place, same time, same format, to hear what they have to say on further issues. So with that, I would like to thank the 2 candidates and ask for a round of applause. That we're going to have one more very brief part of the program to bring you up to date on the television system.
Local broadcast TV station must grant their transmission consent in order for us to carry to them on our cable system. At present, we have an agreement with KTMS. We have not received consent from KPAX or KECI. We want to carry these stations as long as we are permitted to do so, and without any additional cost to you, our customers. We will continue to negotiate with these stations down to the last minute. If we do not receive consent before October 6th, federal law will require us to discontinue carriage of those stations. If this happens, we will replace the stations with other high-quality programming at no extra charge to you. We will contact you when we have a final settlement on this issue. Now, I would like to turn this over to Bill Sullivan and Steve Bettvite, and they will each take a few minutes and update you with the negotiation process.
Thank you. You can stand up if you want to. It's been a long night. First of all, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to have a few minutes of your time this evening. My name is Steve Bettvite. I'm the General Manager of KCFWA-TV in Kalispell, which is affiliated with KECI-TV and Eagle Communications here in Missoula. While the matters I would bring to you may be of less consequence than tonight's candidate forum, they are far-reaching and may directly impact most, if not all, residents in the Rattlesnake area. In a nutshell, our primary concern centers around the 1992 Cable Act and efforts on our part to reach an agreement with Satcom, or Cable Montana, better known to most of you as the Rattlesnake Cable Company. I regret to inform you that since early May of this year, we have been attempting to negotiate an agreement, and as of tonight, we not only do not have an agreement, but in our estimation have been unable to engage Satcom in any meaningful negotiation whatsoever. Without an agreement, KECI will cease to be carried on the Rattlesnake cable on October the 6th. I can and will take just a moment to briefly carry you through what we've done so far. We are frustrated. I can take it all the way back to September 16th, when Cable Montana announced to each of you that they were adding a couple of services to your system, the Sci-Fi channel and the USA Network, and they would only charge you $1.25 additional for that. And it would be a wonderful thing because for less than the price of a Big Mac every month, you could have a couple more channels. I will assure you that through our negotiations with Cable Montana, at no time have we exceeded the price of a Big Mac in an entire year. Our last offer, we have made all of the offers actually to Cable Montana. That's why I say there have been no substantive negotiations. We started this process back in May. We have made one recommendation after another, starting with Mr. Ken Young, who was the Vice President of Broadcast Operations.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
I want to draw a caution while Steve and I are both up here. And that is that when we get into the very details of negotiation, we haven't talked about this, because we can't talk about this. So I want to caution us and you that as we talk about what we're asking for, we're each having our own negotiations, and that's by law. We cannot in any way be accused of collusion or planning against Cable Montana or any other cable system. So, you know, I want you to take what we're saying. We want to be able to answer your questions afterwards, because this isn't a long forum to do that. But please know that we want to be very cautious so that there's no thought in anybody's mind that this is something we're doing together. We've both been invited, in fact, is separately by Perry to be here. And we want to bring you as up to date as we can, but we have to be very cautious of what we do on the fine points of the negotiation. Thanks, Steve.
I think he was trying to save me there. I knew about that. Antitrust is a big issue here. Anyway, there have been numerous and continued negotiations. All of the proposals, at the request of SATCOM, by the way, have come from us. There have been no counter proposals. Our proposals have been rejected. At last count, we had issued to SATCOM, Cable Montana, or Rattlesnake Cable, an offer to at least extend the deadline and continue, at least try and come to some sort of an agreement. And the response essentially was, we've had 75 days to agree and have not. I don't think another 30 days would do any good. To be undaunted, we've made more offers. We have yet to receive any response. And we're still waiting. And at this point, as far as Rattlesnake Cable and Premier Cable, am very concerned. There are other cable systems that I'm much more encouraged with in the Missoula area. And if you have anything to add, Bill, go ahead.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you for letting me interrupt you a little bit like that. Some of you may or may not remember the Cable Act of 1992. I think most of you think that probably remember that it was something that was passed, and oh yes, the federal government said they're going to save us some money on our cable bills. And that basically is where it started. The marketplace and the way of doing business in America was changed many years ago when the federal government gave cable an exclusion from copyright laws that all other types of business and music and publishing and everything else have to deal with. They were given that exclusion in order to help cable grow as they wanted and be able to expand into the marketplace and wire America. As time passed, and especially since 1986, consumers started complaining more and more to the federal government about what was happening in the cable industry. Cable companies, large national cable companies, not so much the Rattlesnake cables, were considered to be very arrogant and very monopolistic. Starting about 5 years ago, people started dealing with this, Congress started dealing with this, and there was talk then about what do we do to straighten out the marketplace. The Consumer Cable Act of 1992, as it's called, says us to do one thing, and that is to try to control the cost of cable and to try to encourage competition in cable. That's right on the first page of the Cable Act. As we see things happening today, the other thing that happened was the Congress then said that the playing field had become very unbalanced. That prior to the early 1980s, cable was a service that brought you television, and primarily your local television stations, and especially in areas like the Rattlesnake that couldn't receive over-the-air television. Instead of wiring America, quite as they did, and as they thought it would happen, what cable did is they invested the profits that they got in other competitive program services. And those program services, which are basically owned by large cable companies, started selling advertising, taking revenue out of the marketplace. The local television stations, whose only form of revenue was advertising, started to be not so successful. I think we've seen it happen right here in Missoula, where we've had a third television station go on the air. 4 years ago, it was, you bet, we're going to be putting local news on the air, but you don't see that happening today. It's not economically possible for that station to do it. They just don't have that. So as they looked at across America, the federal government said, it's time to give local stations back their copyright. It's time to tell cable that if they're going to sell their service for a profit, then they need to negotiate to share some of that profit with the local stations to help them get some of their revenue streams back again and help build especially local service. I think in communities like this, that's especially true. I think as we go on and we find the high cost of technology and also labor and everything else happening, we're going to wind up where it's going to be very difficult for our stations to do news. And I think it's very important that 2 of our stations do news. You need the different views in Missoula, but we're going to have a hard time doing it. So part of this is, it sounds like, I'm going to tell you, we want to make a lot of money from the cable systems. I would tell you that in our, I can talk about my negotiations now, in our part, that's not what we're trying to do with KPAX. What we're trying to do through our negotiations is to help make this cable company, the particular one we're dealing with, recognize that there's going to be a different way of doing business in the future. We want to give them credit for serving people who can't get us over the air, but we also know that there are alternatives that you can turn to try to get us over the air in the way of translators and other things that cable just kind of came in before here in the Rattlesnake, and people didn't find that they would rather buy cable than buy a translator like many other small communities have done. That's a possibility. We're happy to work with you. But we also think that there's some things that can be done. We heard the city council candidates and the mayoral candidates asked, what can you do to guarantee local television? Charlie Canaliato, the director of engineering from KACI, and myself went to the city council 5 years ago as they were negotiating cable contracts. And we could see what was coming. We didn't know when, but we saw it coming. We said, try to find some way where you, in your cable contracts, your franchise agreements, get cable to recognize the local stations and guarantee delivery of local television. That has not been done in any of the cable franchises in Missoula. It's not unheard of. Bend, Oregon has a clause. You have to carry the local television. We have to have our local news. We have a clause that they have to carry MCAT in our cable franchise agreements. Omaha, Nebraska has a franchise that has an agreement that they must provide local service free to city residents in one of their franchise areas. So the local stations are on a free tier, and everything else is on a pay tier. Well, we'd find that really hard to go to a cable operator and say, you're delivering us free, so therefore we want to share in your profits. That's some of the things that communities have done. That's what's happened in the past. As it is right now, we are negotiating. I think our stand is very similar to KACI's. We're not going to ask for a lot of money. You're paying $1.25 for right now a couple of cable services. There's probably less than 2% of the viewing in this area from the Nielsen figures that come out. The local television stations are normally about 70% of your viewing, and during news times, it's 80% of the viewing of Missoula County. We don't want to lose you. You're important to us, and we know we're important to you because of those figures. I can only tell you we will do our best to try to continue to talk to your cable operator, to try to get him to recognize that there's a different way of doing business today, and to try to serve you in this area and be as responsible to that as we can. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Bill, and that's simply, you mentioned translator. What is the strategy in the process for placing a translator where the Rattlesnake citizens could access your signals with their own individual antenna?
The engineer over here in the audience would probably be better able to answer that question. The strategy is to find an area that feeds the signal into here. You're basically shadowed by this mountain back here from TV Mountain, and the signal can't get over it. But somewhere over here, there's probably a mountain that has a site that, or maybe it's Waterworks Hill, where there's a little radio antenna, that a fairly inexpensive translator could be put up to pick up our channels. It'd be a series of translators, let's say the two of us, could pick up our channels on channel 8 and channel 13, translate them to another number, and rebroadcast them into the Rattlesnake area. Those, I think, Charlie, we're talking $12,000, $15,000 would be the total cost of probably installing something like that. Am I guessing right? Per station? Okay, so let's say $30,000 is what it would take to do that. Now, different communities do it different ways. Some form community television districts, and there's $1 on your tax bill, not one of those great SIDs or whatever that you all make. Others, it's a volunteer effort. In many cases, our station, and I think theirs has too, have worked with communities on a cooperative basis. We have arrangements where the communities put up the translator, but we do all the servicing on it. There are various arrangements that we can make. Again, I don't think that we should talk about that together, but we can talk about it with you, because if we talk about it together, maybe we're colluding. But I am throwing the idea out there, and I'm saying that if the community wants to do something and would approach us, we would help you in any way that we can. It's to our benefit to do that, and we appreciate that. Thanks.
I have a question. Could MCAT be gotten up here with one of those translators?
The question was whether MCAT, and I don't know the legalities, but I would say no, because MCAT does not have a license to operate over the air. It's strictly a cable service.
Bill, MCAT could apply for what's called a low-power television station, which is essentially the same division as the translator. So the answer to that question is yes, as long as there was a way for MCAT to beam its signal to the translator site.
Yeah, and that is what they don't have right now. I don't know, could they take it on a closed wire from TCI and be able to put it into a translator?
Or microwave.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions?
Yes.
Does Grant Creek have similar problems, or any of the other north drainage?
Grant Creek does to my station. I understand to KCI it does not, that they have an agreement for Grant Creek to carry theirs. It does to our station. Grant Creek was one of the areas that we opted for retransmission consent. And the primary reason that we did that was signal quality. However, we've had even less conversation with the owners of the Grant Creek cable system than we've had with Cable Montana.
So they would be able to go in on this cooperative thing if the Rattlesnake wanted to?
That is possible. I don't know the terrain. Charlie could probably say that if the right mountaintop on the west side of town was found, that probably areas such as Frenchtown, Lolo, Grant Creek, Rattlesnake could somewhat be put together and have another signal. Everybody in Missoula would get it too, by the way, but would have another signal on the air that they would be directed more towards their area.
We'll take one more question.
This man over here would have a question.
Did you mention that more or less the negotiations now with cable company are more or less dead. And that is the matter, the big issue there is money.
I hope that they're not dead. I think I'm probably speaking here, even though I'm not supposed to, for KCI too, that we're leaving the door open. We've got till October 6th. One reason we've started spots on the air and that they started earlier was to try to inform the community about what's going to happen. If it continues to go the way it is. We don't want anybody to be blindsided, at least from our company standpoint. We want to let you know what's happening out in the marketplace. However, my experience is very similar to theirs in that we have sent agreements as requested to Cable Montana, and those agreements were rejected without question or counter. It was, we can't deal with an agreement like this. Thanks for taking your time. Goodbye. And that was the total impact of our letters.
It's very hard to call that negotiation.
They didn't say
Okay, I think, if there's any additional questions, we'll probably have to ask them of Bill Sullivan or Steve. I had it twice. Anyways, for the reason of closing the meeting, and also, we were going to do a straw vote for a consensus as to what the membership wanted us to do or how they wanted us to pursue with this particular project. I don't feel that there's the numbers here that would form that consensus, but I do want you to know that Jack Warenberg is actively working on this particular situation. He has spoken with different, how should I say that?
Well,
FCC and whatnot. We are working on this. So when we come up with a concrete idea or viewpoint, we will get back with you. We will be having another newsletter coming out for our next candidate forum, and we will give you the information and possibly ask you for a direction that you would like us to actively pursue on. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone. If you have any particular questions of the candidates, please pick up the brochures. Please vote on September 14th. And like I said in the newsletter, 50% is all we get to polls. 10% of those people are active. If we are not active, if we don't vote, how can we complain about the things that are wrong? Thanks for coming.